I just wanted to take a moment to welcome you to our 5th Annual Kansas Summit on Agricultural Growth. Thank you for gathering with us today. We really appreciate the chance to bring everyone together to discuss how we can grow agriculture in our state. Traditionally, as you may be aware, this has been an event that we got to come together in person. And unfortunately, this year we are meeting virtually, but we are still focused on bringing ag sectors together in Kansas to discuss one goal, and that is about agricultural growth for the state of Kansas. I'm confident that we will be able to work together in this virtual environment and to still be able to outline some specific action items as we move forward. Even in challenging time, the role of agriculture that plays in the state of Kansas is never been more critical. It will continue to support our economic growth and to spur Kansas as a whole. So we continue to be focused on this, and we know that it is dependent upon each sector's advancement and industry support. So with strategic vision, we believe that we can continue to spur growth through communication and coordination and collaboration with you, with our stakeholders, and with other Kansans. So I look forward to this session. Thank you again for taking your time out of your busy day. And I will turn it over to Shirley.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Olson. I am Shirley Acedo with the KDA Division of Ag Marketing. We are so glad you have chosen to spend time with us today, and we will be focusing on the dairy sector for the next hour. We're excited about the Kansas dairy industry and have had substantial growth over the last 3 decades. Specifically, the dairy industry contributes $1.9 billion to the Kansas economy and accounts for 5,000 jobs, including direct, indirect, and induced effects. The vision of our agency is to provide an ideal environment for long-term, sustainable agricultural prosperity and statewide economic growth. Our summit sector sessions provide the platform to entertain opportunities and barriers to agriculture industry growth for our state. I would like to review a couple of housekeeping items before the session begins. During the presentation portion of the webinar, all participant microphones will be muted. Please submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Written questions will be monitored by Russell Palaska and myself. At any time during the webinar, when asking a question, please include your name, city, and organization. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted online. I would now like to introduce you to a good friend of mine from the old Arizona dairy days, Dr. Greg Hadley, Director for Extension at K-State. We are thankful to have Greg as our moderator for today and hope you enjoy our session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Shirley said, I'm Greg Hadley. I'm Director for Extension, and I really appreciate being here today. As Shirley hinted to, I've spent most of my life doing something in the dairy industry until here recently when I went into Extension Administration. And so it's an honor to be here and talking to everybody today. We're going to start off with just a very high 50,000-foot view of the Kansas dairy situation. And if we could, let's go ahead and pull up my slides. All right, go ahead and move forward. So as of 2019, the 639 Kansas dairy farms and their 167,000 cows produce 3,819,000,000 pounds of milk, supports 4,980 jobs, and contributes 1.9 billion to the Kansas economy. And so obviously it's a very important industry in Kansas. Forward, please. As of 2019, Kansas ranked 14th in milk per cow, 16th in total milk production, first in sorghum, both for silage and for grain, 6th in hay production, 6th in irrigated cropland, 7th in corn for grain, and 13th in corn silage. Please forward. And as of 2019, Kansas had 26 licensed calf raisers or heifer development facilities, 17 milk processors, and 194 milk haulers. And of course, Kansas is one of the fastest growing dairy states in the nation. And we can be very proud of how far the Kansas dairy industry has come in such a very short time. But we also want to see it to continue to prosper, become even more viable and resilient as we move into the future. And so that is why we're here today, to talk about our dairy industry and how we can improve it, how to enhance it. And I look forward to moderating this session. And next, we are going to have Mike McCulley, the McCulley Group, come on to talk about his perspectives, his outsider perspectives on the Kansas dairy industry. And Mike, you want to say just a few words about yourself, and then feel free to go ahead and get into your presentation.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for that, and good afternoon. Definitely appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. And what I want to do, I guess, as an outsider, hopefully outsider means that I don't live in the state of Kansas. I'm not that much of an outsider. I've worked in the dairy industry for over nearly 25 years. I started with Kraft Foods in 1996. I worked in dairy supply chain and purchasing there for over 15 years. And at some point had responsibility for buying about every dairy raw material for Kraft in the U.S. and Canada, as well as involved with dairy policy and other aspects of the dairy industry there. Turned out to be just a great launching pad for my consulting business. I left in spring of 2012 to start the McCulley Group. And so I've been doing this now for over 8 years, and I work pretty much exclusively with dairy. And that ranges from working with global food companies that buy dairy ingredients to individual processors, end users here in the U.S., whether it's cheese, butter, milk powders, fluid milk, ice cream, and don't tend to do a lot with individual dairy farms. Work a lot with cooperatives. Have done a lot of work with cooperatives. But I think one of the trends is seen is some of the larger farms in particular looking to get into processing. So I have worked on several projects around the country to look into that. So hopefully I can bring some perspective, again, as the outsider of someone who has worked in dairy for a long time, not necessarily on the farm side. I actually grew up on a grain and beef cattle farm in Illinois, so I know cows, but Angus and Herefords, not necessarily the Holsteins and the Jerseys or dairy breeds. That I didn't grow up with those, but been around dairy for a long time. And so what I want to do is to share some perspective on what I think is as I share my screen here. Hopefully it's going to pull that up. What I'd say is the milk processing opportunities in Kansas. And I've got a couple things I want to share with you here today. One is just looking at the trends, and I think what you heard here a couple minutes ago is Kansas, state of Kansas has had good growth, as we'll see here on the next slide. And I would say there's a couple statements I would kind of make as I go through here. This growth is fun, and this is a lot more enjoyable to talk to a group of stakeholders and group of folks like you that are in growth mode and looking how to continue growing versus other states or other spots that are in decline and how to stop decline. So yeah, so in general, you're in a good spot in terms of growth, and it's a lot more fun to be in that situation than it is on the other side of it. Milk production is important, and I also want to talk then about milk processing, because the two go hand in hand, and talk about how those how the two of them have grown together and what the outlook is here for the next 5 to 10 years or so, and some thoughts in terms of what I've seen around the United States on how to support future growth of the dairy industry, not only on the farm side but on the processing side. So as we look at milk production trends, this is a map of the U.S. that looks at milk production over the last 10 years and how this has changed from 2010 to 2019. And in total, the United States grew milk production 13% during that time period. So, quick math, that's about 1.3% growth per year on average, and 13% over the whole time period. But if you look at those dark green states, that is where the most growth has been. So on a percentage basis, you see Kansas is over 50%, and that's at the upper end of the table when you look at the whole country. Colorado, South Dakota, Texas, Michigan being the other big growers. Not that Georgia's anything wrong with them, but that's off a very small base. So pretty much as we look at in terms of total milk volumes, they really don't count. So it's really the ones that I listed here. And as we look at the key regions, I would say key states or regions, it really does break down to Idaho, and we'll talk about more of them here in a minute in terms of manufacturing or processing capacity. Upper Midwest, particularly the I-29 corridor in South Dakota, Western Michigan. There's some fairly a couple high-profile large farms in that area that have been on a big growth tear here in recent years, and probably more to come. Michigan, a lot of growth in recent years, probably more to come now as we'll talk about the Glanbia cheese plant that'll open this fall. And then your area of the country, South Central Plains, Western Kansas, but also Panhandle of Texas in Colorado. So those are, have been, and I think will continue to be good growth areas. And we'll talk more about that here in a couple of minutes. A few other things on this map to point out is I think it's also important to look at California. And that's not a typo, that is 0.4%. So effectively in 10 years, California has not grown really at all. And that's very different than what it was in the 1990s or early 2000s when the growth in California was really outpacing the rest of the country by a large amount. Lots of processing capacity added, a lot of plants built in California. But that really stopped around 2007, 2008. And there may be some of you on the call that maybe came from California. The high feed costs back in 07, 08 did definitely put a dent in the California business model on the farm. And then since then, more and more restrictions around environmental issues, labor costs, and just more and more regulations have really made it not that great of a place to milk cows anymore. The ones that are there are still hanging on, but others have invested in other states. So they've moved back into your part of the country, maybe into Idaho, or maybe even into the Midwest. So that I think is not going to change also going forward. The other area of the country that I think is relevant also to as we look into the future is the Southeast. And you can see most of the states in the Southeast are red and heavily red, particularly the Delta states across into Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, all the way out to Virginia. Huge declines in milk production. That's just not it's just a tough place to milk cows. Heat and humidity are not really the best place for a dairy cow, and they've got lots of it down there. So you've got increasing population, decreasing milk production, and I'm sure each of you can probably talk a little about the milk that moves out of your area into the Southeast and the bottling plants. I think that's going to continue as well. As we then look on the next page, this is where the major dairy plant investments have been over the last, let's call it, 4 or 5 years or so. And some of these I've listed 2017 to 2020. Some of these projects started before that. So this, let's call it the last 5 years. And if you, think back to the prior page, and what I show here is the circles on where those key milk production areas were. Not surprisingly, that's where most of the investments have been in milk processing capacity. Again, Idaho, Upper Midwest, Michigan, and then the South Central Plains. Now, there's a few other locations that, Central Missouri, Arizona, California. There's a few others that are highlighted here, but the majority of investment, I would say the major dairy plant investments, either expansions or greenfield new plants, have been in these areas where milk has been growing. And for those of you that maybe haven't been as close to this over the years, like a question usually comes up, well, why don't somebody just build a plant and then we'll add cows and fill the plant up? and it's actually, it doesn't work that way, it goes the opposite way. What'll end up happening is that there's a good growth on the farm level, and ends up being a surplus pool of milk. And if that, at some point, frankly, it will get cheap enough if it's being hauled a long distance. And at that point, that is when the investment's made to build local processing. So I think, some of the investments in the South Central Plains have been that way. I can tell you the Michigan plant of Glanbia was also very much related to that. The amount of milk that was moving out of state, out of Michigan into other states, finally got to the point where the milk was cheap enough to justify a large-scale investment like that. So that's where a lot of the plants have been built for in these fast-growing milk areas. You can also see, I listed down at the bottom in terms of the legend of what the plants have been. And you can see the orange stars, or orangish stars, are cheese plants, and that's where you've got a fair bit of the investment has been in cheese. And then you've got the blue stars are in milk powder, which has really dominated the investment in your area down in the West Texas. And then the green are the all others, and you got a mixed bag there. You've got a few fluid milk bottling plants. You've got a couple other yogurt, miscellaneous things like that. But the majority of investment over the last 5 years has been on cheese and milk powder. And I would say in general, the country probably has enough milk powder capacity for now. And I think when the Michigan plant opens up for Glanbia, that will fill up the cheese capacity for a bit here. And we'll talk a little more about the outlook here in a second. I think, as I said, over the next 5 to 10 years, I expect these trends to continue in terms of where milk is growing. Like I said, the West Coast is challenged, particularly California is challenged with any growth here going forward. So I think the Southwest, the Upper Midwest, Idaho are all places you're going to see continued growth in milk. Upper Midwest, I think at the end of the day, is still a favorable place to milk cows. There's a good infrastructure between plants and all the support on the farm level, closer to population centers, and importantly, water, which is, as you know, not every area of the country has abundant areas or supplies of water. That doesn't seem to be an issue in the Upper Midwest. So along with feed. So I think the Upper Midwest continues to see good growth and good investment in dairy. Southwest, I think, probably for a little while, given the base programs that are in place, they'll probably won't see a huge amount of milk growth for a bit. But I think as you go forward, there'll be more growth there and more investment in processing. And finally, Idaho is pretty much full of milk right now. There'll be additional investment coming there in the near future. So be on the lookout for that one too. I think each one of those areas I would call to have a positive business environment, and it really is welcoming for new investment either in dairy farms or in dairy processing. So that's why I think we're going to see more growth there as well. And I think in general, that's why I wanted to highlight it on the prior page. Cheese and milk powders and other products like whey products that are more suitable for export, I think is where the growth is. You really don't see a lot of investment in fluid milk bottling capacity. You do see some in more called specialty type milks, which I think will continue. But really where the investment has been and will continue to be is on products that are growing here in the domestic market as well as internationally. I mentioned a couple minutes ago that the Glanbia plant in Michigan will have an impact on the outlook for additional processing capacity over the next few years. The COVID situation also has thrown a bit of a curveball at dairy plants and milk processors. Really don't know what the demand's going to look like here going forward. So I would say in general, the United States will have more than ample capacity for most dairy products for the next few years. And because of that, in addition to some uncertainty on the economy and demand, probably going to see, or did I say probably, will see a decrease in the amount of activity on new plant capacity being added. Now, it typically comes in steps. So I would look out another several years and then probably seeing at that point, maybe 23, 24, some additional new capacity, sizable capacity coming online. But I think for the next couple of years, probably just going to see more modest changes in terms of plant capacity, see a few plants go out, maybe some small expansions on others, but it's probably a little more of a stable environment there. As I said, I think Kansas is well positioned as we look out over the next decade or more to take advantage of what's going on in the industry. Like I said, I continue to be a big fan of cheese. We see good domestic growth on cheese consumption. I think we're going to see the same, or we'll continue to see the same on a global basis, as well as milk powders. And I know there's been a significant investment in your area on milk powders for export, and I think that only continues. So some of my thoughts before we get into kind of open it back up and then getting over to your roundtable is to keep milk growing. And I know a fair bit of focus is maybe on the large farms, but this is size inclusive. I think you need to look at small farms, medium-sized farms, whether it's a 50 cow dairy, a 500 cow dairy, or 5,000 cow dairy. Make sure that there's a place for everybody because each one of them can serve a segment. And I know more broadly and probably longer term, there is concern about increasing consolidation at the farm level or concentration at the farm level, as well as the processing level. Seeing the same thing over on the meat side of the business and the beef side of the business. So that is something to keep an eye out for, I think, moving forward is, how do we have a diversified industry that that loves all size farms, all size plants. And it's always, it's easier said than done in terms of the economics on that. But I think that's something, I'd urge you to keep in mind as we kind of talk through this today, as well as moving forward. Second thing is, again, fortunately, you're not California in terms of all the regulations. You have I would say generally a positive business environment, low taxes, low regulation, right to work, non-union states. Those are all things that are very important when dairy companies look at where to build a plant or expand a plant. And I can tell you, I've worked on quite a few projects with dairy companies as we look at different places around the country. And, usually the first question is there enough milk there? Two is, what's it worth? And then invariably about the third or fourth question is it a union or non-union work area? And that's, for whether that's so people maybe disagree with that, but that is the reality of it, is that the right to work is an important thing. So as much as you can kind of hang on to that, as well as keep regulations down to a workable minimum and not have everything tied up. I can tell you in some states, the thought of trying to site a new plant or a new dairy, as some of you may know, can be years to go through all the environmental reviews and everything else associated with it. To be able to shorten that down and make it more realistic is something that's important, because again, as you talk about attracting new milk processing to the state, you're looking at companies that are outside of Kansas. They're going to be looking at Idaho. They're going to be looking at Michigan. They're going to be looking at Texas. They'll be looking at other states around the country. And when it gets down to it, you are competing against other states. So as you rack up all the different important attributes when it comes to these sorts of things, it is something definitely to keep in mind. Another area I'd urge you to really consider, and it's good that K-State's moving in this direction. There's probably never enough in terms of education and educational resources to really build up an infrastructure around dairy in the state. I can point to several other universities and programs in the country that have done a good job. SDSU up in South Dakota State has done a really good job in terms of their program. But to have the ability of having a program of dairy science, food science, dairy technology in an in-state university, and to be able to then feed those graduates maybe back into their communities, into the companies, it really is important. So again, I can't stress that enough. And then the last one I'll leave you with is think about how to diversify. And I had started that when I started this page, is talk about different farm sizes. We could talk about a small farm with a direct-to-consumer model, or we could talk about a 10,000 or 20,000 cow dairy with investments into processing, and there's all points in between. So that kind of keep an open mind when you talk about that. And also location, we'll talk about Western Kansas, probably more suitable for those large-scale farms. But you've got population centers back in the eastern part of the state that are also maybe more suitable as we move back into the middle part of the country where there's more people as well. So it's not just make milk powder in western Kansas. It could be making a fluid milk product or an ice cream product or a yogurt product in the eastern part of the state to service consumers in the eastern half of the country. So with that, I will wrap up my presentation. I think we have a little time for Q&A. And let's see, turn this back over.
If we have questions for Mr. McCauley, we encourage you to use the Q&A app. It's in the center bottom of your screen. Just type them there, and we will get those questions asked. While we're waiting for that, Mr. McCauley, you mentioned that they're going to be looking at Idaho. They're going to be looking at Michigan in terms of adding milk processing capacity. So just how do you suggest a state like Kansas break through and become a part of that discussion about how to attract dairy facilities in the state?
I'll start with maybe it sounds like a joke, but it was actually a real story. When Hilmar was looking at building their second plant, moving out of California, they didn't want to build more in California. And when they went to different states, the joke was that, well, I ended up like Texas, rolled out the red carpet, California rolled out the red tape. And that's also, something to keep in mind. You don't want to be known as the state that rolls out the red tape. You want to roll out a welcome package with business-friendly, initiatives and programs. So, and it's not necessarily economic development grants and tax breaks. What I found working on these different projects and working with economic development councils is, and I think it's a good thing to keep in mind for those types of folks on the call or if you work with. When you get like a grant or economic development, bonuses, whatever you want to call it, that really helps close the deal. And you can't have tax breaks or these sorts of maybe economic development initiatives or bonuses, whatever you want to call it, to make a bad deal good, but it can make a good deal great. And that's maybe how I would probably best phrase it is, how do you have your economic development group in the state or in the region or the local areas be able to work with the state, work with the Department of Ag and other key stakeholders to put together a package that's attractive and very attractive relative to other states, and then have those deals at the end to make that good deal great.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McCauley. Do we have any questions for Mr. McCauley? All right, we want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us today, and there was a lot that Mr. McCauley said that kind of refers and points to the fact that we are a great place to be dairying right now. We do have a question that has come up. Mr. McCauley, is it better to focus on recruitment of outside of the state investment or focus on internal growth?
Well, as I said, the main thing will be to continue growth of milk production. And there, the old saying is, build it and they will come. So that's where I would start, is to continue focus on milk production growth. And as long as you have, growing milk supplies, that will be attractive. That will attract attention from other processors and other investment. Realistically, most of your investment will come from out of state. It could be other dairy companies that are based in the West or any other part of the country that are looking to expand or diversify their geography. So I think that's, in reality, what you'll have to do is work with and try to attract outside money and outside companies to come to the state.
Okay. Thank you for that answer, Mr. McCauley, and thank you, Ron, for the question. Are there any more questions for Mr. McCauley? Okay. If not, I think we'll go ahead and once again, Mr. McCulley of the McCulley Group, thank you for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate you being here and sharing your expertise with us. And we hope that you stay on because I imagine there may be other questions coming in as time goes on. And so thank you very much. Next, we're going to move to our panel discussion. And our panel discussion today, we are very fortunate. We have 4 excellent stewards of the dairy industry in Kansas joining us today. We have Greg Bethard of HPP Dairy, Aaron Pauley of DJ Dairy, Melissa Reed of Hildenbrand Dairy, and Dan Sinistraro of Eastside Dairy. And I almost got that out, Dan, without twisting my tongue, but it didn't quite make it there. I'm very sorry if I butchered your name. But we will start off, I think, and just ask each of our attendees to kind of give us the real quick rundown of yourself, your dairy experience, the dairy farm that you're working with, and all that. And so we'll just go in order here. And Greg Bethard, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Greg.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Greg. I appreciate it. And I'm happy to be a part of this because I'm kind of a new citizen of the state of Kansas. I've been here about 3 years. I've been coming out to Kansas for years as a consultant, so I was familiar with the state, but got into the dairy business, had the good fortune to be able to partner in it on dairy down here. So I'm the CEO and a partner of our dairy, and we're in Plains, Kansas, in the southwest corner of the state. Our county doesn't have any other dairies, so we're the only other dairy here. But we've been so happy milking cows in the state of Kansas. The community's been so friendly. The state agencies have been really good to work with, from a permitting process and everything else. We just couldn't be happier. My experience in the dairy industry has been all over the world, and then mostly on the East Coast and the Midwest. And gosh, the state agencies and the communities are just not receptive to dairy. It really makes business a problem. Mike mentioned in his presentation, about a friendly place to do business. Well, from a dairy standpoint, our businesses, or we find Kansas to be really friendly. So we would like to be in a growth mode ourselves, as a lot of people would. And I think Mike's presentation was very pointed because nobody can grow until we get more processing. That's just really not going to be possible for anybody. So I think that's probably our most urgent need as an industry now, is to figure out a way to get processing. And if you think about all the jobs, good jobs that would bring to our state, just what potential there is for the state of Kansas economically, if we can get something like this going. But these projects are not small, and it's going to certainly take a concerted effort from a lot of people to try and pull something together to get a major processor in here. So, but thank you for including me as part of the panel.
All right, thank you, Greg. And next, we will move to Aaron Pauley of DJ Dairy. Aaron, could you tell us about yourself and your operation?
All right, thank you, Greg. Yes, Aaron Pauley. Our dairy is located about 20 miles southwest of Wichita, Kansas, in Sedgwick County. One time we had in our county, the highest number of dairy farms in the state of Kansas. Unfortunately, I think we're down to 15 to 20 right now. Our farm, we milk 160 Holsteins. Operations myself and 2 of my brothers now. I came back to the farm after graduating from K-State in 2000 and worked alongside my dad and grandfather. And then unfortunately, they both passed within 6 months of each other in 2017. And so kind of been a challenge just to lose that much experience within a 6-month period of time. So also have a diversified cropping operation as well. So That's kind of our status.
All right, thank you, Aaron. And next we'll have Melissa Reed of Hillenbrand Dairy.
Hi there, good afternoon. My name is Melissa Reed. I'm with Hillenbrand Farms Dairy. So we are a family owned and operated dairy farm. I am fourth generation and farms owned by my dad and my uncle. I'm grateful this is half, it's not showing the manure I have under my desk. So I did milk this morning. We're a small family operation, milked 127 girls and turn around and do it again this afternoon. So, but I cleaned up here for you. So I tried my best. So we are a little unique in that we process our own product on the farm. So behind me, I have a retail farm store behind that door. And we sell our milk to over 120, wait for it, 5 stores. I just added 5 more in the Kansas City, Kansas area. So we just launched into those stores today, which is exciting, that we are growing, we are expanding, and these unprecedented times and all this craziness, we're pivoting. We're making some big, bold moves, and we're excited for the future. We've been processing our own product for about 11 years, going on 12 years in October. So we're far more experienced than we were, and every year we get a little wiser, a little smarter, and now more than ever, I'm having people asking me about, processing on a small scale like we do. And I will tell you, there is a lot of opportunity in Kansas that has gone untapped for a very long time. So I'd love to see other dairies take the plunge. It's a risk. It's a huge investment initially. You have to make sure you have the labor, meaning the kids that want to come back. So that's a huge critical point. And but I'm happy to answer any questions related to small scale dairy farming and running a processing business on the side.
All right, thank you, Melissa. And we will definitely be talking about processing as this session goes on. And so we look forward to your comments and the comments of your colleagues as well. Our fourth panelist is Dan Sinistraro. And Dan is with Eastside Dairy. And Dan, could you kind of give us the information about your background and also your operation?
Sure. I'm originally a Californian, and I grew up on a small dairy in Northern California, and thought I didn't want to be in the dairy business. Went to vet school, practiced in Southern California for about 7 years, and decided I did want to be in the dairy business after all, and got into a partnership in California, Southern California. And then in 1993, we looked to move somewhere, and my partners and I were some of the first ones to move out here to Western Kansas. We started our first dairy in 1994 out here, milking around 2,000 cows. After that, we built 3 other dairies. We've since dissolved that partnership, and now I run Eastside Dairy here as a family operation. We milk about 3,500 cows and do some farming, not a lot for Western Kansas, but in addition to that, I spend quite a bit of time in the industry, policy, and co-op politics. I'm vice chairman of Dairy Farmers of America, and I also serve on the board of directors for National Milk Producers Federation. So I've been involved quite a bit in that, and I look forward to being on this panel and hopefully shedding some light on some issues or questions that the people here in the industry may have. So thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Dan. Sometimes my mouth gets moving faster than my fingers can turn off the mute button, and so that may happen a couple times here. But appreciate you all being here today. We've got kind of 4 general topics that I'm going to ask questions about. Once again, if anybody has any follow-up questions regarding these topics for our panelists, make sure that you type them into that Q&A app at the bottom center of your screen, and my colleagues here will let me know if there are any questions, and we will get them asked. But first, could we start talking about this past year, and then everybody likes to talk about 2020 and how it is a very interesting year. Could you talk about the operational changes that you've experienced since this past year? So what are some new things that you're doing? And we left off with Dan. So Dan, why don't you start first?
Okay. Yeah, 2020 has been an interesting year, obviously. You know, we started out in the state of Kansas, at least in the marketing area here, with very strong production growth in the Southwest, including Kansas, with a lot of milk, stretching our processing capacity beyond what we could handle. We were starting to spill milk in as early as February. Just didn't have any place to go with it. And then as the COVID situation began to develop and all the disruption in markets and everything that was going on, it created quite an imbalance immediately, especially at a time of the year where we were having growing milk production and not enough capacity to begin with. And so there was instituted an across the board 10% reduction in production for the Southwest agency, which would not include the Eastern Kansas guys, but as Western Kansas guys. And so that presented quite a challenge. You know, a lot of us had to figure out what to do. There was a lot of extra beefing, extra drying early, ration changes. You know, we tried to do is feed more roughage and try to get a little less flow and a little higher components. And we were moderately successful at that, I would say. Although that time of the year, it's hard to do because the cows are working against you. They want to milk that time of the year. The COVID deal, as far as employees, it was, you know, we were out here in Western Kansas. We're pretty socially distanced and isolated. And early on, there were no cases out here, so nobody thought too much of it. But obviously, everyone is and was going to experience some. We did have an employee fairly early that tested positive, and we did have some difficulties with the health department wanting to quarantine. The guy who tested positive, obviously he was out of work, but those who had been in contact with him at the dairy, and they wanted to not come to work. And they wanted basically, you know, half of my employees to not come to work the next day, which is, as you guys who have dairies, and most of you probably know, is just unacceptable. We have cows to take care of, calves to take care of, things that have to be done, and we don't carry extra employees. So that presented a real challenge. So I had a little bit of a battle with the health department, and in the end they relented, and those guys continued to come to work. But so going forward, what we tried to do was, you know, keep our guys separate as much as possible, and you know, in the dining area or on breaks, just so if we had that come up again, we wouldn't be in that circumstance. But it was definitely you know, some miscalculation on the part of I don't know who it was that wanted to quarantine all the employees that need to take care of animals in essential businesses, and you know, that just doesn't work. And so that was a real challenge for us. I would say those would be the two major ones that we've experienced.
All right, thank you, Dan. And next we'll go to Melissa Reed. Melissa?
Hello. Okay.
So, Melissa, what changes have you experienced what operational changes have you experienced this past year? You made mention that you got 5 new stores recently. So, what all has gone on this past year for you?
Well, you have to, on the dairy side, not a whole lot. On the processing side, our world's been thrown upside down. So coffee shops and restaurants have always been a big part of our business and have served us exceptionally well. We love being able to go to a coffee shop and deliver 60 bottles of whole milk that's going to be used for an espresso. And so that really just in a matter of 2 weeks took about 30% of our business and just disappeared. So we had to kind of really adjust and evaluate. And the silver lining in all of this that we never anticipated was the increase in demand in our farm store. So having the on-site location here really served us exceptionally well, and we have even seen the traffic continue. It's dipped maybe a little from that initial phase, but when grocery stores started running out, I think it really put consumers in the mindset of where does our food come from? How can we source in other avenues? What are some of our other options out there? And while I'm not delivering 60 bottles to one location, I'm definitely having customers taking 4 and 5 from my location here and then grabbing an ice cream cone on their way. So it's definitely worked, but in that process, we've had to implement masks, social distancing, and for us, protecting our plant employees that are literally separated by just a single wall. And so figuring out barriers to make sure that the employees are protected and safe, because exactly like Dan, we don't have extra people just sitting around waiting to fill in at any given time. Every employee is exceptionally needed and necessary. And so we've been very lucky and blessed not to have a COVID case here, but we also are masked up in the processing plant as well as in our store. We're keeping things as clean and socially distanced as possible. Ironically enough, we bought the biggest bucket of sanitary wipes before all of this happened, and we've just been using those like crazy, and they're hard to find anymore, but keeping the handles, the doors, telephones, those high touch points consistently clean, and being conscious of that. So all new things to our new world, but it's allowed us to adapt, and we're coming out strong, I think.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. And next we'll move over to Aaron. And Aaron, what are some of the new things you've been doing at DJ Dairy?
Yeah, I'll kind of touch on the labor side. We had 2 high school and college students that did one of the milkings for us, and when COVID hit, their mother was pregnant, and so just for the safety of everyone involved, they took probably 8 weeks off until their mom had a baby, and so we were kind of short-staffed, kind of scrambling a little bit to find someone to fill in the milking shift, and it was hitting about the time as field work was starting to pick up with getting ready to plant corn and soybeans and that. So that posed a little bit of an issue. I was able to work through it. Other thing we had a little bit of issue with was, and I'm sure others did as well, trying to source ingredients with the decrease in ethanol production, trying to find DDG locally or at all. That was an issue. Otherwise, we did have a lot of people reaching out to us because we are 20 miles from a large metropolitan center, wanting to know if they could come out and buy milk right out of the tank. And, we said no, obviously. And, it was hard for them to understand, well, why can't we just come out and do it? And, we'd rather give you the money than help you out. And, we just, for the safety of everyone involved, had to decline. And, I try to push people, as many people, suggest, if they want to support a small farm, send them Melissa's way, because they have the processing and, produce a great product as well. So that's kind of how things have been shaping up down here.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. And next, we're going to go to Greg. And Greg, what changes occurred on your dairy this past year?
Well, I tell you what, it's been a long year. Probably we'll all look back on this, one of the most unique years we've ever experienced in so many ways. Just from a milk pricing standpoint, we've probably seen some of the highest prices we've ever seen, and probably some of the lowest prices we've seen in 10 years. So, I'm a budgeter and like to plan and budget, and man, I burned through so many spreadsheets and hours changing things repeatedly over and over again as circumstances change. It's just been crazy up and down. I've gotten more frustrated with government programs than I ever have. I've never really had to deal with so many government programs, and the assistance has been out there. It's been a massive amount of time just to keep up with all that and document. And as a large producer, it's very frustrating that we hardly get anything proportionally out of it because the programs are designed to make it a little more difficult for larger dairies. So that's been a little bit of a challenge for us, trying to navigate our way around that. So it's been really unusual from that standpoint. But it certainly hadn't been boring. We haven't been sitting around wondering what we're going to do next. Everything that's thrown at you, I think you try to find opportunity in it and try to figure out a way you can make it work for your business and reorganize, re-strategize. Dan mentioned the 10% reduction that we had from our co-op and really our region, not just our co-op. And, all of us struggled with how to do that. Dan described how we did it. We happen to have a lot of D&B cows, so we got rid of a bunch of those, which is not easy to do in a short period of time, just because if you remember, at the same time, the slaughter plants had people that were sick and they weren't running at capacity. So just lots of challenges to get things done. We sent cows all over the place, but we managed to hit our 90% number and do okay with that. Again, it all takes planning. On the COVID side, that of course has impacted everybody. I can't imagine there's a person in any industry or any business that hasn't been impacted by it. We have not had any employees with COVID. We've had a number of employees that have family members, so we've paid them 2 weeks to stay home. Early on, this is back in February when it first happened, I ordered masks and thermometers and sanitary wipes, and we make our own hand sanitizer here from ethanol. You mentioned the ethanol plants; they still made enough that we could get some stuff to make hand sanitizer with. So, we've got all that stuff prepared and trying to plan for if we lost a good majority of our employees. Just like every other dairy, we just can't go without employees. We're 24/7 and got to have it happen. So we've got plans in place in case we lose a bunch of people, but plans we surely hope we don't have to execute. A couple years ago, we instituted this or signed up for the Secure Milk Plan program. And I know that's not really specific to COVID, but just the mindset that we've got a secure milk plan filed with KDA, that if something like foot and mouth were to come along or any other disease outbreak, our facility is designed and set up and we've thought through how to handle that. And that's just a comforting feeling. You just think pandemic and what has happened, and apply that to other diseases. And it's comforting to know that we've got that in place, and KDA was very helpful in putting that together for us. So, but the rest of the year, we're halfway through the year virtually, and good Lord knows what's going to happen the rest of the year. We have no idea. We're just keeping our eyes wide open and trying to make sure we plan and prepare. And I really believe that all these things, there's opportunity in all of them if you just keep your head on straight and don't go crazy and just kind of focus on your business and your cows and your people and keep your head looking forward, not backwards.
All right, good message there, Greg. And as we look to moving forward, just wondering, what are your plans for the future of your dairy operations, kind of in the long term? My sheet says about 30 years. That may be a little bit too long for my time frame, but whatever you describe as your long term, what plans do you have for your dairy operation in the future? And let's go ahead and start with Aaron, please.
All right, thank you. Given our location, proximity to Wichita, we might be looking to move further west. Like, every day, essentially the town gets a little bit closer to us. We're kind of right in that area where, you're still predominantly farming, but there's houses starting to pop up here and there. And, even though we're in still a pretty rural setting, we're getting people moving out from Wichita, and they don't understand the smells, the odors, the normal farm traffic slowing down for stuff like that. So, that's going to be something we're really going to have to evaluate is, do we continue at our current location, or do we, go another county or two to the west? So that's going to take a lot of thought, preparation. Just we've been at our current location for starting our 102nd year. So, it's several, Dan and Greg, they've already jumped that a long time ago, probably when they were about my age. And so I guess it's just, when you get to this age, that's the decision you have to make to stay or move. So it's going to be interesting. I'll say that.
All right, thank you, Aaron. And Dan, what about the future for your dairy operation?
Well, I think the future here in Western Kansas, I think that the opportunities for consumer direct and value add aren't as great. I think that we will probably continue to try to push the envelope on efficiency, on cost of production, keeping cost of production down, technologies that can help us to decrease our freight and our cost structure is what we'll continue to do. We think we'll have to produce cheaper milk all the time because that's the way capitalism works, and that's we're kind of in the commodity business out here, and that will probably continue that way. Not to say there won't be opportunities, and I guess we probably continue to take advantage of opportunities in processing or for higher income revenue side through working with the co-op, and I'm involved in the politics of that and in the workings of that, and you can't just stay on the sidelines. You got to be involved, and I know Greg is involved, and I don't know about the rest of you how involved, but we're getting to be a small group of producers, even in a large co-op like DFA is, and we need to be very involved because they're making decisions all the time that are affecting our future. So I think that even as large guys, you think of maybe as more commodity producers, and we are, but we're involved on the marketing side more through the co-op, and we're influencing the decisions that are being made there more and more. So I think we'll continue to do that. Whether or not we expand or get bigger out here, we may. It will depend on opportunities for processing, as Greg mentioned, and what I'm 60 years old now, so it'll probably be the next generation that needs to make that decision as to whether they want to get out there like Aaron was talking about at his age. And that'll be someone else's decision. But in the meantime, we'll try to be as efficient as we can, adopt technologies that make sense, that make us more money, and work the marketing side through the co-op.
All right, thank you, Dan. And since you mentioned Greg, could you tell us what's going on, what you're thinking about for the future of your dairy farm?
Sure. So we, like anybody else, we'd like to lower our cost of production. And Dan said that very well, that really is our overriding goal. If we can milk fewer cows and lower our cost of production, that'd be fine. If it takes more cows to do that, then that's what we have to do. That's really the overriding goal. It's not about how many cows you milk. It's about what it costs you to produce your product. Because as Dan said, we're a commodity industry out here, and Melissa's able to differentiate her product and get a higher price and create a niche. And that's awesome. I don't know that we could do that here in any way. So the only way we can compete is to produce it cheaper than somebody else or continue to drive our costs down. So Dan is the absolute master at low cost production, and we're not nearly as good as he is. So we have a lot of good examples around us that we can look at to say, gosh, that's where we'd like to get to. So we've got lots of low hanging fruit to get to continue to lower our costs and get better. But there's lots of ways to grow without milking more cows. And that's what we're focusing on now, is how can we grow our business? And to me, growing the business means doing things that lower your cost of production, taking on more services yourself, doing things in-house, not hiring things out. There's lots of opportunities there. And we're such a young business in terms of our growth cycle. We just recently grew that there's a lot of things there to keep us busy for a few years and certainly keep your mind active and your employees and your team all engaged and excited about where you're going. So I think there's lots of things for us to do, but long term, without processing, you know, this has been said over and over by many of us, there's no chance to add more cows unless we get more processing. I just don't see any other way. And so if we have that processing come to Western Kansas, that'll open a lot of doors for a lot of people. And I think we're game as an industry to really increase our efficiencies and grow, because I think this is one of the few places in the country where that can actually happen, and it's welcomed and the community's receptive to it.
All right, thank you, Greg. And I think we'll go over to Melissa now. And Melissa, same question. What's the future of your operation look like?
Yeah. Well, as we connect direct with our consumer, we really take it as our responsibility to be the voice of our industry, be the voice of dairy. And I feel that it's important that I talk not just about what we do, but what each and every one of the dairymen that I'm with do as well on their dairy, and not ever bash a small dairy to a large dairy, because it's all relative, right? You know, yes, I'm milking 127, but if you would have talked to many people 50 years ago, it would have been a ginormous dairy, right? So for us, we want to continue advocating, but we really want to do that through our tours that we offer, but we also want to kind of show the technology that dairy offers. So we want to move to robotics. Our current milking parlor is a 6 herringbone parlor built in 1974, so we're due. And so we'd like to modify the parlor, or actually our current freestall system, to include Lely robotics. And then, you know, actually I was just looking at auction time, a automatic calf feeder went up for auction. Any other dairymen watch that? No, sold for $3,300, just saying. So we didn't buy it. Should have, but we didn't. But an automatic calf feeder is also on the Christmas list as well. So those are like short-term goals on the dairy side that, you know, a 5-year, potentially 10-year plan for expansion and growth, because we feel like, you know, with Fort Riley in our backyard, Junction City close, it gives us a chance to really showcase the cool things that we can do on a dairy farm. Now on the production side of things, we want to continue to, you know, growth in our sales, but we are water restricted here, believe it or not. I'm in Eastern Kansas and I'm water restricted. And that's because of the wells that we run off of. Well, of course we could probably, you know, fish for water if we needed to. With our current situation, we can never grow to really beyond 500 head where we're at here. So we definitely want to diversify and get, you know, every dollar we can out of each product, versus going too far to too many places and then having to increase our herd count. So for us, it's all kind of relative. We want to consider ourselves a Kansas dairy. We definitely want to stay within the state of Kansas. Kroger or Dillon's is our biggest customer, and they have definitely pushed and prodded us to go into Nebraska and Missouri. And while that opportunity is present, we feel we're best served close to home, where we can connect more one-on-one with our customer. So eventually we want to increase product size options, and get into some niche markets that are not being represented right now. And I'll just tell you straight up, that includes ice cream, yogurt. There's still various cheeses that are not made in the state of Kansas. There's a lot of opportunity to be had if someone were to be, you know, interested in going into that. So, and we are primed, we're geared for it. And that would be, you know, the that's enough to keep me busy for at least 15 years, right? Between all that, I think that'll cover me.
All right, Melissa, thank you. We're going to circle back to you, Melissa, and a lot of the people, there's four of you, but all the panelists have kind of mentioned processing it in one way or another. Dan mentioned, being more involved with the cooperative. You're obviously involved in direct marketing. So you mentioned that you're looking at getting more higher value products from your operation and things like that. If somebody has a question about how do you get involved in this and all that, you kind of alluded to it as it's not as easy as it may appear on the outside. What are some of the things that you have to think about when you move into being a direct marketer?
Yeah, I talk to a lot of different dairymen from all over the country. I get questions all the time, and I love really trying to put them on a right path, because as dairymen, we like to think of the equipment. We like to think of the process, and it's easy and natural for us to kind of go through and try and design our plant, to design kind of how our process would look, where we miss the big boat of everything, which is the market, and distribution and logistics. So I can't stress enough the importance of first starting with kind of your passion and the goal in mind. So is that goal to sell every drop through the processing plant? Is it to just have kind of another supplemental income? Is it to keep another member of the family busy to provide income for them? Define the goal, and then also really hone in on the logistics of creating and getting your product to market. So whether that's through an on-site retail store, through the mail and shipping your product all over the country. Are you targeting grocery stores? Are you targeting restaurants? All those things need to be determined before you implement any type of equipment into your processing plant. Because I've definitely talked to guys that are already in the buying stages of their processing plant, getting equipment and sourcing equipment, but yet not really understanding the logistics is a huge problem, because you have to be able to move that product. You also have to be able to have the equipment to support your goals. So it needs to be sized properly, and it needs to be something that you can grow into. I'll be the first to admit, when we built our plant, we put a 200-gallon vat pasteurizer, and we committed to making all of our chocolate milk through a vat pasteurizer. Well, I was making chocolate milk 4 days a week, and it was not worth the energy and the effort. And so an 800-gallon pasteurizer was well worth the money, and allowing me now, as I've been able to continue to grow, to make chocolate milk twice a week. So cutting down immensely on labor. So I guess, my rambling in all of this is to start kind of from the back end and work your way forward, versus looking at building the plant and the equipment and everything, and then hoping that if you build it, they will come. It's really honing in on that market beforehand.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. And Greg, you had mentioned the processing side as well. What are your thoughts as far as processing, whether it be doing more of the direct marketing or working with the current processors that you have now? What are your thoughts on the whole processing side of your business?
Well, it's in my prior life, I was a consultant and had a number of clients that did on-farm processing, and it's really hard. It's a very hard model to make work, and that's why I think a lot of people probably don't appreciate what Melissa's family has done in making that work. Because the ones I've seen fail, primarily they got into too many things. They made 20 different products and didn't do enough of any one to really have some efficiencies, and the amount of equipment and the labor and whatnot really kind of ate them up and made it hard. And then what do you do when with your extra product? I think that's always a challenge is, if you use 40% or 60% of your milk, who's going to buy the rest of it? I'm not sure that co-ops like DFA are real happy to have their producers just say, well, we'll send you some more this time of year, less that. That's a little hard of an arrangement to make. Where we are here on farm processing, I just don't think it's an option. I mean, our county has 4,000 people. It's a great place to milk cows. And part of the reason it's a great place to milk cows is there's no people. And so it's just not, as Dan alluded to as well, it's just not a place I think where that's realistic for us to have that happen. But it's a significant niche that people can find. And if you can't get big, you can grab a niche. So you can either lower your cost of production or raise the price of your product and figure out a way to get more for your milk. And that's the way to find get more for your milk. But my end of processing is I want to do everything we can to recruit a processor to come here. Anything we can do as dairymen, as the state, as the community, to entice a processor to come here is going to just benefit every one of us and benefit our state. And that's where all my effort and selfishly my thinking is that we need to recruit a processor here to Western Kansas to put in a cheese plant or a MPI plant or MPC plant, something like that. I think would really change our industry.
All right, thank you, Greg. And I think we're going to kind of move forward here. And what I want now, and it very well could be the processing side or whatever. But before we move on to the questions and answers, could each of you give me the #1 barrier that you think inhibits dairy growth in our Kansas dairy industry? And just real quick, just one word answer or whatever, just what you think is the main barrier to advancing our industry. And let's go with Dan.
I would say more processing capacity and labor. If I can say two words, one had already been mentioned quite a bit, but labor certainly is an issue.
All right, Aaron.
Yeah, I think it's kind of dependent on where you are in the state. Where we're at, I would say public perception. We had another industry or another group in agriculture try to come in and talk about putting in a plant in our county. And I mean, even people you thought were ag friendly, they were just totally against, what was perceived as big bad corporate agriculture. So like I said, depending on where you're at, ours would just be public perception / regulations at the local level. But then also to agree with Dan, labor, sourcing a good labor source would be key too.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Greg.
So for our current corner of the world, that's most definitely processing is what's the biggest limitation to opportunity for us, without a doubt.
Okay, thank you, Greg. And Melissa.
Yeah, I'd have to echo Dan and say labor. I mean, for us, I would put so many more trucks on the road. All the requests I got for door-to-door delivery would sure be wonderful if I had the labor and really good qualified people to do it.
All right. With that, we're going to open it up for questions. And does anybody have questions for any of our panelists? We have one. Please comment on the recent article in Wall Street Journal about Walmart, Kroger, et cetera, building their own bottling facilities. How will this change our milk processing approach and our industry? And Dan, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that one. It's probably a long answer. The players are big in the retail world. Well, the Walmarts, the Krogers of the world, and they're wanting to do some vertical integration, partially because of some of the players who had been supplying them before. And as you guys know, you know, Dean Foods and Borden both recently went through bankruptcy, and which are the two, Dean's is the largest and Borden is fairly sizable. So there were some issues in the industry there. Will Kroger and Walmart continue to do that? I think the jury's still out. I think that I know they've had some difficulties, and now we've had some realignment of the other processing assets and probably some right sizing. There was some excess capacity there that's now taken out of the system. And so I can't say what they'll continue to do. I think it's possible they do some more. It's possible they don't. And, you know, from my perspective, if there's, as a dairyman, if they continue to do that, there's going to be opportunity for direct shipping to an outfit like that, if you're interested in that. And there's nothing wrong with that. It comes with certain risks, as some direct shippers have found out who are going to Dean's and found themselves without a market. And there's certain amount of safety in a co-op, but co-ops have their problems. And, you know, DFA obviously bought most of the assets of Dean Foods. And so we've been, as a co-op, been more investing a lot of money in processing, and so that we have homes for our milk, because we don't want to be odd man out like has happened when some of these outfits decide they don't need your milk. And if you're on your own, independent, where are you going to go? And so we've been consciously investing in processing. You know, I think there's room probably for a variety of ways here. I don't know what Walmart will do. I really don't. But I think the important thing is, as a dairyman, is I understand what my risks are in the way that I choose to market my milk, and the rewards, and each one of them has certain trade-offs. And so those would be my comments on that. And I'm not sure I answered the question.
Oh, I think you did just fine. Melissa, what about you? The same question. What are your thoughts about Walmart getting involved in these ventures?
Well, that's interesting. I work and I'm a vendor for Kroger, and so I definitely know how do you toe the line? You know, how do you say what you want to say without throwing yourself under the bus? When you work one-on-one with a partner, you definitely have to appease that partnership, and they will put a lot of requests on their vendors or their dairies or their partners. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, they're putting us at a very high level of expectation that we should be able to reach and overcome. I see it from the perspective of, in Kansas, I'd love to see more diversity in our selling options. Because really you have DFA. We are able to sell excess if we have it to Midwest Dairy, Central Equity out of Missouri. And so, but there are not very many cooperatives in the state or, you know, local partnerships that you can even sell your product to. So having other options, I think, is huge, but you do have to have enough for them to care. And so it makes you wonder if the small dairies would have a say in that or be able to really have much skin in the game. But I would never balk another processor coming to the state, that's for sure. I would think that anyone would open that with open arms.
All right, thank you. We got a question on water. And Greg, the question is, water has not been mentioned as a hurdle to dairy and/or dairy processing. Where we dairy, we continue to watch a declining water table. If you are not struggling with water conservation or usage concerns, can you explain why?
So you want me to take that one, Greg?
Yes, please.
Okay, yep. So yeah, water conservation in our state is obviously very important. You know, I'm from back east where I'd never heard of water rights, so coming out here was the first time I had to deal with it. But I think we're very fortunate that the state of Kansas had the foresight years ago to put the water system in place to manage the resource that we have. You know, I know some other neighboring states, like down in the Panhandle, what I understand, you just kind of go, at least until recently, poke a hole and take out any amount of water you wanted to. And I think that can be devastating to a resource. So I think the state of Kansas has managed it well. I think we need to continue to be careful and be judicious with how we use our water. I also firmly believe that we don't need corn and alfalfa to feed dairy cows and have a productive herd. I'm a nutritionist by training, and I've worked all over the world, and I've fed all kinds of crazy diets and things you can't even imagine. You know, I've worked in places where they can't grow corn, and guess what? We feed cows just fine, and they do just all right. So I think we've got the ability with low water use crops out here like sorghum and wheat that we can feed our cows and import grains. And so I'm frankly not worried about providing feed for our cows. I think there's going to be enough water to supply the water needs of the cow drinking water needs. And as long as we manage the resource and the data that I look at least in our local area, I think we'll be okay. Now, there's certainly areas localized that have serious problems and they just don't have that much water left. And we happen to be fortunate that we're in an area where I think there's good water, and that's one of the reasons why we came here. But as a state, I just don't think that's going to limit our growth or really put a bottleneck on us. I really don't. I think it's something we can manage, and there's technology and know-how and management that we can become much more water efficient in how we do things than what we are today. So there's so much opportunity there. I just don't see that limiting us.
Thank you, Greg. Does any of our other panelists would like to contribute to that? All right. With that, I want to thank all of our panelists for agreeing to join us today and talk about our dairy industry. You know, we are poised for something great when it comes to Kansas, when it comes to dairying. And but before we shut everything down, I believe that Russell Plashka wants to come on and ask us some more questions. And this is questions for everybody. And so, Russell, how are you going to do that?
Well, we have a poll question we'd like to ask. And let me pull that poll question up. And it should be on your screen there. And there's several choices, so you'll have to scroll down through there. And we'd like you to choose your top 3 areas of focus for the Kansas dairy industry to focus on. So I'll give you some time to take that poll. And as you're taking that poll, you know, again, express my sincere gratitude for all the panelists and Mike to come on and do the presentation. But we also want to remind everybody that this webinar is being recorded, and there will be available on our website at www.agriculture.ks.gov/summit. In the next week or so, that recording will be available. So also, we want to also remind you to join us for the crossover sections on August 17, 18, and 19. And then the final session, Thursday, August 20th, will be the main Ag Growth Summit webinar, where we'll hear from guest speakers and also share highlights from these sessions that we've been doing over the past few weeks. We're also rolling out a new program, the first ever Agriculture Heroes program. So since the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, Kansas farmers and ranchers and agribusinesses have performed essential functions to keep food on the tables of people worldwide. So KDA established this program as a way to recognize those in agriculture who have gone above and beyond to serve others and better their community when it was needed most. So we're asking everyone to nominate an individual, a family, or a business in Kansas agriculture you feel provided a notable contribution to the ag industry or their specific community. The nomination period is currently open, and we're going to close those nominations on August 10th. The nomination instructions can be found at www.agriculture.ks.gov/summit. So as we end the poll, and I'll share those results now, and you can see that an overwhelmingly 81% chose the milk processing, and then in close second, well, I wouldn't say close, 59% federal immigration reform, so kind of address our labor issues, and then 47% on dairy beef processing for cold cows and fat dairy beef to keep processing of dairy cattle in Kansas. So thank you for participating in that poll. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Shirley Acedo for closing comments.
I would just like to reiterate just how excited we are about the Kansas dairy industry, specifically that the industry contributes $1.9 billion to the Kansas economy and accounts for 5,000 jobs, including direct, indirect, and induced effects. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us today, and we thank you again for your participation. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.